This video will be about installing the i2p software. Now, for those that didn't read my short description of what i2p is, let's go ahead and just read off their description themselves. i2p is an anonymizing network, offering a simple layer that identity-sensitive applications can use to securely communicate. All data is wrapped with several layers of encryption, and the network is both distributed and dynamic, with no trusted parties. Essentially, the idea is people who install the i2p software exchange messages to each other through tunnels. They build up tunnels, both in and out tunnels. They send things out their out tunnel into someone else's in tunnel, and by the time everything is said and done, any particular message has gone through so many different hosts, it's hard to trace back who actually is communicating. Now, while Tor focuses on outproxying to the public internet, i2p is a little different. It has an out proxy, but its main focus is doing something akin to what Tor calls hidden services. Basically, you can put different services, SSH for example, or IRC or whatnot, hidden inside of the i2p, for lack of a better word, cloud. Now, one of the common uses of this is for hiding websites, what's known as EAP sites inside of i2p. And one of its great advantages over Tor is speed. For whatever reason, however they've optimized it, for doing things like hiding a web server inside of a darknet, i2p just seems a whole lot quicker than Tor. So let's go ahead and install this on our Linux box. Now, I've already took the time to download it, so I saved some time during the video. Basically, we just need to download this exe. Now, you might be wondering, why am I downloading an exe to install on a Linux box? Trust me, this works out. I've already downloaded, so let's go ahead and drop out to a command prompt and issue a few commands. For convenience, I'm going to change directory into the downloads folder, and let's see what's there. There's my little installer. Now, if I want to install that, I can actually just do a java -jar and list that exe, and that will actually work for installing it. With one particular problem in this box, I have yet to install any kind of Java runtime. So the next step will be I have to install my Java runtime. Now, for this, I'm going to need root privileges, so we'll use sudo. And of course, I have to enter my password. Say yes to that, and at this point I'm probably going to have to pause the video for a while because it will take a little bit of time to install my Java environment. Now, if you happen to be doing this on a system you use regularly already, possibly you already have this installed, so this won't take nearly as long for you. And after some amount of time, we now have our prompt back. So let's go back and reissue that command. Now, notice I'm not running this with root level privileges, because I don't need to. There's no sense in actually running i2p with root level privileges if it's not necessary, and this just adds one little extra layer of security. Actually, ideally I should probably be running it from a totally separate account, but so be it. Now we'll go ahead and install i2p, and it guides you through the rest of the installation where you can make some changes if you want, but I'm just going to take all the defaults. That's a fine location as far as I'm concerned, and create that directory. Next, yes. And if you're installing this on Windows, that's pretty much what you would have done from the start when you double click on the exe. And I have a video on my website someplace or another that should show you how to install i2p on a Windows box. Alright, now that we have that going, let's go ahead and change directory up and go into our i2p folder. Let's see what's in there. Okay, several different scripts we can try later on to accomplish various tasks. However, the first thing I want to do here is just get things up and running. I'm going ahead and tell it to run i2p router, and I'm going to, in this case, just use status. As you can see, i2p is of course not running because I haven't started it yet. I can use start and stop and whatnot to go ahead and start the service or stop the service. Since it started up, I now need to configure a web browser so I can actually go and use it. Now if you notice in the background, the web browser I had up, it refreshed to a different page, the console page. From here I can control everything about my i2p session. But before I go ahead and do that, let's actually set up our proxy settings so that we can use it. Now there's a couple of different ways we could do this. Now under System, Preferences, Network Proxy, you can adjust things there and set it up. However, I had some pretty bad results from that. You might want to look into that if you want to use tools other than just Firefox and i2p. But for us, let's go ahead and go underneath Edit Preferences and adjust things there underneath Advanced and Network. Now we'll go ahead and go into our connection settings. By the way, there's all sorts of cool plugins you can use to automatically switch back and forth between proxies, and I highly recommend you install one of those. But this works okay also. Now let's go ahead and set it to use the local host 127.0.0.1, and it's listening on port 4444. Now by default this is an HTTP proxy. There's other types of proxies. You can use a SOCKS proxy. It gets a little bit more complicated, so we're just going to use the HTTP proxy. And by the way, when you use i2p, there is various information about your browser. Let's say, for instance, user agent string and so forth. The i2p automatically modifies to help with your privacy. So we got that configured, but we're not going to use it quite yet, because more than likely we don't actually have a good connection yet. It's still establishing connection, and there's a few different places we may want to check out. First of all, I went into i2p internals, and here you can adjust your bandwidth limits and whatnot. Also, what might be useful if you want to go out to your NAT box is type in what ports you want to forward to whatever machine is running i2p. Now these ports seem to be randomly assigned, so go in here and find out what they are and assign whatever it says in both TCP, so in this case UDP, and down here it's told to use the same port, TCP. Go out to your firewall and go ahead and do your port forwarding. However, it will work without it. Maybe not as quickly, however. Okay, it's got a little bit of connection going, and I may have to wait a little while before I can actually connect to anything on i2p. It takes a while to establish tunnels. If you were to go out and look at how i2p works, let me see if I can find those documents as of yet. Actually, let me go back in, and this gives you a chance to see where those proxy settings are again. I'm going to go back and turn off the proxying temporarily. Now if we go to the i2p site, there should be a lovely illustration in here about how the i2p works in general. Here you can see that basically you establish in tunnels and out tunnels. Let's use Bob as an example in here. Basically he sends stuff out his out tunnel into someone else's in tunnel, and that person, if its message is not for them, ends up sending it out one of their out tunnels to someone else's in tunnels. And they use a distributed system called NetDB to decide how things are routed. One of the key goals of i2p is to be as decentralized as possible. With Tor you have the directory servers that tell people about what Tor nodes are out there for routing traffic. i2p tries to avoid that because as a single point of failure. For instance, I think it was a little over a year ago, China blocked i2p access. China blocked access to some of the Tor directory servers, which caused Tor essentially not to function. At least not as far as easily being able to find out who you can connect to connect into the Tor network. So that's a bit of an issue. i2p avoids that, or tries to avoid that, by having a very decentralized system. Even its sort of DNS system is decentralized, which I may talk about in future videos. Hopefully, with a little bit of time though, we'll actually have some tunnels established, and we'll be able to do some more work. I may have to pause it for a bit. I'm going to show you a few other things you can configure inside of i2p. There's various services you can set up. We have a couple client tunnels. The HTTP one is already enabled, as you can see. If we want to enable our website, that we can, it automatically comes installed, not on by default, but installed by default. We can go ahead and start that tunnel up, and people can actually surf to our own hidden site. I plan on covering that stuff in future videos. And there's various other services that are provided as well. But the main one we're going to be interested in for this video is just this HTTP proxy that will allow us to get to various EAP sites. Also, another nice thing that you have inside of i2p is the ability to use torrents inside of i2p. So if the other people are using i2p, they can all route this torrent traffic between each other, and no one necessarily knows who's downloading what. Let's also go underneath the tunnel section. In here you can find out some information about who you set up tunnels with and whatnot. And there's all sorts of settings you can do inside of i2p services, which these are all things you may want to look at and ask on the forums for the best things to do. I'm going ahead and keep the defaults for the time being. Mostly I'm killing time under the hopes that I'll have a few tunnels set up before too awful long. Unfortunately, that seems to be taking a little bit longer here. I don't want to go ahead and set up port forwarding, so I may have to pause the video. In the meantime, let's go ahead and just go back into preferences and network settings and go ahead and re-enable that proxy. Once again, it's easier if you just go ahead and install a Firefox plugin to make the switching quicker. Now that we've done that, let's actually see if we can reach anything. Let's scroll down the page some, and there's a couple of different i2p sites they list here, like plugins.i2p. Let's see if we can find one. Yes, i2p hosted sites of interest. There's the forum system, but you can reach that from the public internet. Notice how all these i2p sites end with .i2p. As far as websites I think we want to visit first, let's go to this wiki. Ughaus wiki. I'm honestly not sure how to pronounce his handle. Now it's probably taking a little longer than it should because it's still establishing tunnels. Once you've been in i2p for a while, you get better integrated. Once again, that whole decentralization thing is a huge advantage as far as not having a single point of failure. However, it also takes a little bit of time for the information about routing and whatnot to actually get passed around from client to client. So, while that's waiting to come up, I'm going to pause the video and we'll resume momentarily. And we finally established our connection. Now that may seem a little slow, but trust me, i2p starts responding a lot faster once you've been in it for a while. And from this particular site, you can go in and see other EAP sites. For instance, starting points for i2p. Here's a list of ones that they recommend. Also, they have an EAP site index on this page that lists a ton of different ones with a little bit of commentary on what's on there. There's also perv and nproxy, which list sites and their availability, uptime, whatnot, whether or not they're up at this particular moment, and I should say response time. And from there you can just click on any of them, well, almost any of them. Some of these are not necessarily, let's say, kosher to view in certain settings. We'll leave it at that. But essentially we're inside of i2p darknet now, and we can surf to EAP sites. Hopefully in future videos I'll cover more things you can do with i2p, such as actually hosting your own EAP site using both the built-in Jetty and your own personally chosen web server. Thank you for your time.